This wasn't a flashy hire. There was no viral press conference, no dramatic announcement. But the Cleveland Browns just made a move that could quietly decide the entire future of Shedeur Sanders in the NFL. And most people completely missed it. When Todd Monken took control in Cleveland, fans expected talk about playbooks, tempo, and creativity. Instead, his first real statement had nothing to do with trick plays or offensive fireworks. It was about something far less exciting and far more important: control, structure, protection. Because quarterbacks don't fail in the NFL because they lack talent. They fail when organizations rush them, expose them, or pretend a shaky foundation will magically hold under pressure. Cleveland knows that story better than anyone. That's why this hire matters more than it looks on the surface. Monken didn't walk into the building trying to win headlines. He walked in trying to fix the one thing that has quietly sabotaged this franchise for years. And by doing that, he sent a message, not just to the locker room, but to Shedeur Sanders himself. This isn't about hype, it's about intent. Every decision from this point forward will be viewed through one lens. Are the Browns actually building around their quarterback, or are they repeating the same cycle under a different name? Because once a team commits to protection and structure, there are no more excuses. Development becomes real. Accountability becomes unavoidable. And that's where the pressure shifts. This move didn't just change the Browns' coaching staff. It changed expectations. It forced a conversation Cleveland hasn't been able to avoid for decades. Are they finally ready to build something stable? Or are they about to test another quarterback inside a system that's not ready to support him? Because if this works, Cleveland gets more than a quarterback. They get a reset. And if it doesn't, it won't be because the warning signs weren't there. What happens next will tell us everything. The most important move Todd Monken made in Cleveland didn't involve a quarterback, a playbook, or a single snap. It happened quietly, and most fans barely reacted to it at first. That move was bringing in George Warhop. And that one decision told you everything about where this franchise is actually headed. When Todd Monken took over the Cleveland Browns, he could have started by selling optimism. New schemes, new energy, new buzz. Instead, he went straight to the most uncomfortable truth Cleveland has avoided for years. You cannot build a quarterback if you can't protect him. Last season exposed that reality brutally. It didn't matter who was under center. Pressure came fast, pockets collapsed early, and timing-based plays never had a chance to develop. That's not a quarterback issue. That's a structural failure. Warhop's hire is Cleveland admitting that out loud. He's not a hype name. He's not flashy. He's known for being demanding, detail-obsessed, and unapologetically strict with offensive linemen. Communication, accountability, discipline, that's his reputation. And those traits don't show up on highlight reels, but they decide careers. This matters even more when the quarterback in question is Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur isn't a reckless improviser. His game is built on rhythm, anticipation, and control. He wins by reading defenses, manipulating leverage, and delivering on time. That style only works if the pocket holds long enough for decisions to matter. Give him chaos up front and you waste what makes him special. Give him structure and the offense changes instantly. That's why Warhop wasn't just an assistant hire. It was a philosophical statement. Monken isn't trying to save the Browns with vibes or shortcuts. He's starting from the inside out. Fix the line, fix communication, fix protection. Then, and only then, let the quarterback take over. It also sent a quiet message to the locker room. This rebuild isn't about personalities or reputations. It's about standards. If you don't meet them, you don't play. Simple as that. Most teams talk about protecting their quarterback. Cleveland just showed they're finally willing to prioritize it. And once you do that, there are no more excuses left. But while Monken focused on fundamentals, the outside conversation took a sharp turn. And that's where this story really started to heat up. Just as Cleveland fans started processing what the Browns were actually building, the conversation took a sharp left turn. Because this stopped being only about football, the moment Skip Bayless stepped in. Instead of praising the hire of Todd Monken, Skip challenged it, not by breaking down schemes or win-loss records, but by questioning the direction entirely. He argued that if the Browns were truly serious about maximizing Shedeur Sanders, they should have gone younger. And more importantly, he said they should have gone in a completely different direction culturally. Skip specifically pointed to Nate Scheelhaase, an up-and-coming offensive mind from the Rams organization, a former quarterback, a coach who learned under Sean McVay, someone who spent years in rooms with Matthew Stafford. In Skip's view, that pairing made more sense, not just strategically, but symbolically. And that's when things escalated. This wasn't framed as an attack on Monken's resume. It was framed as a bigger issue: representation, opportunity, the narrow pipeline for young black offensive coaches in the NFL. Skip's argument landed hard because it touched a nerve the league has never fully addressed. The NFL talks diversity, but when it comes to offensive leadership, the pathway to head coach, the list stays short. Very short. Suddenly, this wasn't just about who calls plays on Sundays. It became about who gets trusted to develop quarterbacks in the first place. Some fans agreed with Skip immediately. They argued that pairing a young black quarterback with a young black offensive coach could create a long-term partnership built on shared perspective and growth. Others pushed back just as hard. They pointed out that Cleveland isn't in a position to experiment, that after decades of instability, the Browns needed proven structure, not symbolism. They didn't need potential. They needed certainty. And that's what Monken represents to them: experience under pressure, real results, and a track record of developing elite quarterbacks. That's where the divide formed. On one side, progress, opportunity, and breaking old patterns. On the other, stability, protection, and minimizing risk. Both arguments carry weight, and that's why this debate didn't fade after one segment. It spilled into fan discussions, social media, and league-wide conversations. Because now people weren't just asking if Monken was the right coach. They were asking what kind of future the Cleveland Browns actually want to build. And once that question is out there, there's no avoiding what comes next, especially for the quarterback caught right in the middle of it. Once Nate Scheelhaase entered the conversation, everything shifted from theory to possibility. Scheelhaase isn't a household name, and that's exactly why his inclusion caught attention. He represents a different path, one the Cleveland Browns ultimately chose not to take. A former college quarterback turned coach, Scheelhaase built his resume quietly, learning the game from the inside out rather than jumping straight into the spotlight. Most recently, he's been part of the Los Angeles Rams offensive ecosystem, working in close proximity to Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford. That matters because those rooms are known for obsession with detail, coverage identification, route timing, protection adjustments, and situational awareness. It's football taught through repetition and precision, not slogans. Supporters of Scheelhaase saw that background as a natural fit for Shedeur Sanders. The argument wasn't that Scheelhaase was more accomplished than Todd Monken. It was that he might have grown with Shedeur instead of managing him. A young quarterback paired with a young offensive mind. Two careers rising together. Less hierarchy, more collaboration. Less, this is how it's always been done, more adaptability. That vision resonated with a certain segment of fans because it felt modern. It felt like the league's next chapter rather than a continuation of the last one. But there's an important detail that often gets overlooked. Scheelhaase has never run an NFL offense on his own. He hasn't carried the weight of weekly game plans, playoff expectations, or a locker room demanding immediate results. And Cleveland isn't a patient environment. It's not a developmental lab. It's a pressure chamber. That's where skepticism crept in. Critics of the idea argued that pairing a high-profile quarterback like Shedeur with a first-time head coach could create more risk than reward. Not because Shedeur lacks intelligence or potential, but because the margin for error in Cleveland is razor-thin. One slow start, one losing streak, and development plans disappear fast. So the Shedeur argument wasn't really about whether he could become a great coach. It was about timing. Do you bet on upside and symbolism? Or do you lean on experience and structure when the spotlight is already unforgiving? That question sat at the center of this debate, and it's exactly why Cleveland's final decision revealed more about their priorities than any press conference ever could. This is where the conversation stopped being about individual coaches and turned into something much bigger. Because at its core, the Browns' decision forced everyone to confront a difficult trade-off: experience versus representation, and there's no clean answer. On one side of the debate sits Todd Monken, a coach with a long resume, multiple stops, playoff experience, a proven track record developing quarterbacks under real pressure. Cleveland didn't hire him because he was exciting. They hired him because he's predictable in the best way possible. He installs structure. He demands accountability. He knows what breaks young quarterbacks and how to prevent it. For a franchise like the Cleveland Browns, that matters. This isn't a team operating in a calm environment. Every loss becomes a headline. Every mistake becomes a referendum. When you're trying to develop a quarterback like Shedeur Sanders, stability isn't a luxury, it's survival. From Cleveland's perspective, Monken represents fewer unknowns, fewer learning curves, less guesswork. But that's only half the picture. The pushback wasn't about Monken being unqualified. It was about what his hire symbolizes in a league where offensive leadership pipelines remain narrow. Critics argue that young black offensive coaches rarely get the same patience, visibility, or margin for error as their peers. They're often asked to be perfect immediately or wait indefinitely. That frustration is real, and it's why the discussion resonated beyond Cleveland. Supporters of representation-focused hearing aren't asking teams to ignore winning. They're asking why opportunity so often arrives only after years of gatekeeping, why innovation is celebrated, but only when it comes from familiar names, and why quarterbacks of color rarely get paired with offensive coaches who reflect their background or rise alongside them. Cleveland's choice didn't dismiss those concerns, but it didn't prioritize them either. The Browns chose certainty over symbolism, proven structure over potential alignment, not because representation doesn't matter, but because they believe timing matters more. In their view, this roster and this quarterback don't have the luxury of learning on the fly. And that's what makes this decision so polarizing. Both sides are arguing for the same end goal, putting Shedeur Sanders in the best position to succeed. They just disagree on how to get there. One side believes experience protects him. The other believes opportunity empowers him. Cleveland made its call. And whether it was the right one won't be decided by philosophy, optics, or debate panels. It will be decided on Sundays. When the pressure is loud, the margin is thin, and the quarterback has to trust that the system around him won't fail. That's when this choice stops being theoretical and becomes real. For all the noise surrounding coaches, representation, and philosophy, the truth is simpler than people want to admit. What Shedeur Sanders needs isn't complicated, but it is non-negotiable. He needs time, he needs trust, and he needs a system that doesn't sabotage him before he ever settles in. Cleveland has chewed up quarterbacks for decades, not because they lacked talent, but because the environment around them collapsed. Broken pockets, constant pressure, playbooks that asked quarterbacks to survive instead of operate. Confidence eroded before it could ever take root. Shedeur can't succeed in that version of Cleveland. His game isn't built on chaos. He's not a backyard improviser relying on broken plays. His strength is rhythm, anticipation, seeing leverage early and getting the ball out on schedule. That only works when the structure around him holds long enough for decisions to matter. That's why protection sits at the top of the list. You can talk about schemes all day, but if pressure arrives in under 2 seconds, the offense becomes reactive. Timing routes die. Progressions speed up. Even elite quarterbacks start playing defense against the rush instead of offense against coverage. Cleveland has lived in that cycle far too often. Beyond protection, Shedeur needs clarity. Young quarterbacks do develop when they're guessing what the staff really thinks of them. They develop when roles are defined and authority is clear. Is he the guy, or is he insurance? Is he trusted to change protections, or told to stay within a box? Those answers shape confidence faster than any stat line. That's where Todd Monken matters. Monken's offenses are demanding, but they're honest. If you earn control, you get it. If you don't play. There's no ambiguity. For a quarterback like Shedeur, that transparency is critical. He doesn't need to be coddled. He needs to know exactly where he stands. And then there's the city itself. The Cleveland Browns aren't a patient market. Every throw will be clipped, every mistake magnified. That pressure breaks quarterbacks who are still trying to find their footing. Shedeur, however, has lived under scrutiny his entire career. Attention doesn't rattle him, uncertainty does. Give him protection, and he can play free. Give him trust, and he can command the offense. Give him real opportunity, and the ceiling rises fast. But remove any one of those pieces, and the outcome won't be fair to judge. Because quarterbacks don't fail in isolation. They fail when the structure around them does. And Cleveland is at the point where they can no longer pretend otherwise. If you strip away the debates, the hot takes, and the outside noise, everything about Cleveland Browns right now comes down to 3 brutally simple words: protection, trust, opportunity. Miss on any one of them, and nothing else matters. Protection is the most obvious and the most ignored. Cleveland has asked quarterbacks to operate behind collapsing pockets for years, then acted surprised when timing-based offenses never took off. You can't develop rhythm when defenders are in your lap before your second read. You can't build confidence when every dropback feels like survival. That's why the focus on the offensive line isn't optional anymore. It's survival-level football. For a quarterback like Shedeur Sanders, whose game is built on anticipation and precision, protection isn't a luxury, it's the entire ecosystem. Give him even an extra half second and the offense changes shape. Take it away, and even great decisions don't matter. But protection alone doesn't fix everything. Trust is where franchises quietly sabotage young quarterbacks. This is the part fans don't always see. Does the coaching staff actually trust the quarterback to run the offense? Or do they protect themselves by shrinking the playbook, leaning conservative, and calling games scared of mistakes? Young quarterbacks don't grow when they're treated like game managers. They grow when coaches let them identify coverages, adjust protections, and live with the responsibility that comes with control. That's where Todd Monken becomes critical. Monken's systems are demanding, but they're honest. If you earn trust, you get the keys. If you don't, you sit. There's no guessing, no mixed messaging. For Shedeur, that clarity matters more than play design. Confidence comes from knowing where you stand, not wondering what one mistake will cost you. And then there's opportunity, the one factor teams love to talk around. Not backup reps, not limited packages, not we'll see how it goes. Real opportunity means real snaps, real drives, and real accountability. The league is full of talented quarterbacks who never failed. They just never got a runway. If Cleveland treats Shedeur as insurance instead of investment, the outcome will be predictable. But if protection improves, trust is granted, and opportunity is real, the ceiling changes fast. That's why this moment matters. The Browns aren't short on talent anymore. They're short on excuses. And from here on out, every move they make will reveal whether they truly understand that, or whether they're about to repeat the same cycle under a different name. This is the moment where the story stops being about hires, debates, or off-season chatter, and becomes about identity. For years, the Cleveland Browns have lived in between, not bad enough to fully reset, not stable enough to truly build. Quarterbacks changed, systems changed, promises changed. The result never did. Confusion became the culture. What's happening now feels different, not because it's guaranteed to work, but because it refuses to sit in the middle. Hearing Todd Monken wasn't about chasing trends or optics. It was about choosing structure, choosing accountability, choosing a system that demands clarity instead of excuses. That decision alone tells you Cleveland is done pretending development can happen without discipline. And that's why Shedeur Sanders sits at the center of this moment. This isn't just about whether Shedeur is talented enough. It's about whether Cleveland is finally ready to stop sabotaging its own quarterbacks, ready to protect first instead of patching later, ready to trust instead of hovering, ready to give opportunity instead of insurance. Because if Shedeur succeeds, it won't just validate a draft pick. It will expose how many times this franchise failed the position before him. And if he struggles, the conversation won't be about arm talent or confidence. It will be about whether the organization truly learned anything at all. That's the pressure now. This hire stripped Cleveland of its favorite fallback time. There's no "we're still building" shield anymore. You don't bring in Monken, prioritize protection, and talk structure unless you expect results to follow. The excuses are gone. The spotlight is locked in. And that's uncomfortable for a franchise that spent decades resetting the clock. But discomfort is where growth actually happens. The Browns are standing at a fork in the road they've seen before but never fully committed to. One path leads back to the familiar cycle: impatience, confusion, and wasted potential. The other demands patience, consistency, and belief, even when the noise gets loud. This isn't about being right on social media. It's not about winning a debate panel. It's about choosing who you want to be when the pressure hits. Because quarterbacks don't fail in isolation. Organizations fail them first. And what Cleveland does next, how they protect, trust, and empower Shedeur Sanders, will tell the entire league whether this franchise is finally evolving or just repeating history with a new face. Either way, there's no hiding now. The identity test has already begun.